Hello, and welcome to the Michael Harding podcast. Holy God, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and as they say, I'm not the better of it. When you go to hospital, you need to be in the full of your health. You need to be fit going into hospital. And when you're getting out, try and get out as quick as you can. That's what they say. And I think they're right. But at the same time, what happened to me in hospital was a miracle, because I wasn't really well at all, and the blood in the arteries were going the wrong direction. They were going into veins they shouldn't have been going into. And that doesn't sound good to me. I'm not a medical person, but they were able to fix it. So I had surgery on the spine, and I have a pain in my back. But they're telling me now that I should be as right as rain after a short while. So I'm absolutely delighted with myself. And I'm delighted. I feel so grateful for the doctors. I feel so grateful for the nurses and all the ancillary staff in the hospital that made it possible. It's just amazing. And here I am, I'm home in the hills above Loch Allen. And it's still lockdown, and I'm still very, very happy to be doing a podcast. Very happy that you're present, and thank you for being here. And I'm going to do the Tinker's Course. I was supposed to put up the second half of the Tinker's Course last week, and I will put it up. I won't say when, but as soon as I can in the next couple of weeks. I was thinking today, because it was a lovely spring day, and to be home, like hospital disempowers you. You don't make your own choices. The breakfast comes, the nurse comes to do the bloods, the nurse comes to do the blood pressure, the doctors come on the ward round, then they tell you, oh, you're going for an x-ray, and it's just like you're responding instantly to whatever they tell you to do. So you lose that kind of sense of your individuality and your own control. And when you come home then, there's a lovely sense of just luxuriating. It's a lovely time to sort of go into a quiet meditative place in yourself and sit like a mountain on the chair on the patio, just like, breathing, and the trees are breathing, and the grass is breathing, and the yellow gorse is breathing, and you're kind of just one with the whole universe, and it's all just breathing, in the sense of being alive, a sense of being conscious. It's very beautiful. And the lockdown is lonely for everybody. I was looking back. I'll share a little memory with you. This goes back to, maybe 10 years ago. You won't find fairies where you're going, the driver said to me. We were on our way to the Dublin fruit market, and it was 4 a.m. on a spring morning, and I had mentioned that fairies usually infect human society around that particular time of year and that particular time of the day. It's the twilight between nighttime and dawn, or between sunset and nighttime. That's the time that the fairies to be out. But the driver was right. Fife's loading bay was a mundane world of trucks and men in hard hats and yellow jackets whizzing around on forklifts, carrying produce to the lorries. One old merchant showed me where the fish market used to be. I was here the morning they demolished it, he said, pointing at a car park. There was even an air raid shelter in that corner, and it took the demolition squad ages to smash it. It makes me cry to think of what they destroyed. My friend loaded up the lorry with pallets of fresh vegetables for Mullingar, and on the way home we stopped in Smithfield for a coffee and a few muffins with a stout Italian merchant who worked in the market. For me, he said, midsummer is a romantic time. I'm 30 years married, he said, and each year I bring the wife for dinner. Nearly all the restaurants she liked were Italian. They were beautiful restaurants. I loved them. His teeth sunk into a bilberry muffin, and then he intoned the names of all the restaurants that he loved in Dublin: the Monaco, the Cafollo, Fortes, the Green Rooster, the Broadway. And he finished his bun and wiped crumbs from his lips. The Mayfair, and the Lido, and the Maple Leaf, and the one down in Abbey Street. What is it called? The Ritz. He looked wistfully into the sky. Bernardo's, La Capricce, Cesare. He sounded like he was praying in Italian. When we left him, he was almost in tears. That's two sad men we met today, said the driver. The fella you met in the market and that Italian man. So I bet we'll meet a third before nightfall, 'cause things always happen in threes. That evening we had a barbecue. Burgers on the lawn beneath the beech trees, while the neighbours sipped wine on the patio, and young people made a bonfire from wood they wheelbarrowed out of a farmer's shed, though the farmer wasn't amused. Then everyone circled the blazing bonfire and the music began. One woman brought her bowron and a bag of whistles, and each time the guitar man changed key, she'd reach into her bag for another whistle, like the mechanic poking for a different wrench. She told me her grandfather was the first bowron player with the Chieftains. One freezing November evening in the early 60s, Paddy Maloney drove down to Westmeath to meet him. But the man's wife hated the bowron with a passion, and she banned it from the house. She said he was only a fool to be playing an old drum, so he used to hide the instrument in the rafters in the barn. When Maloney arrived, the old man had to sneak out, unbeknownst to his wife, collect the bowron from the shed and go to a neighbour's house to play it. We were all laughing at this when a fiddle player arrived, a gentle giant from a distant parish who takes his emotional burdens out of bed each morning and carries them around all day like dead fish. A quiet man who reeks of sorrow, and who, according to those that know, can sigh as loud as a donkey brays. He grew up in a cottage, but when his father died, he built a bungalow along the roadside so the mother would be nearer the church. But they said that for years afterwards he'd often go up to the derelict cottage and just sit in the kitchen and stare at the wall. For a while he sat on the patio, listening to other guests with mighty attention. He was like a haystack, absorbing any amount of emotion they threw at him. And no matter how much sniping or whinging went on around him, he just listened and nodded and looked at the ground. My friend nudged me and said, "Do you see him over there?" I said, "I do." He said, "That's another sad man. I knew I'd find three." However, appearances can be deceptive, because when eventually he took the bow to his fiddle, the music that came out was so fierce that one could only conclude that the fairies had arrived for midsummer, and that they were doing a dance wildly somewhere inside him. Now that story to me, I suppose it represents the contradictions of being human, that you can be sad on the outside, that a musician could arrive so slowly and so laconically and keep his head down and not really be engaged with the party or the barbecue. And yet when he would take up his fiddle, the world was transformed into joy, kind of wild joy. I do sometimes wonder, is it an Irish trait, or is it a musician's trait, that they carry the sacrament of joy in their music. And that in some way you can have a very sad person whose music is very joyful. I know a lovely amount of quiet musicians. I know a lovely amount of musicians who kind of just slip in shyly to the pub and have the first pint and nod at people and then to slip into the circle of the musicians, into the session. And Lord God, there they are for hours, issuing huge, passionate, roaring joy into the world. And maybe sometimes I feel like that too, on the inside, where I have all this old stuff, you'd call it faith, stuff of the imagination, you know. I love it. I mean, when I go in there, it's like I feel good. When I'm present, just being there, I feel good. You had no control over your life in the hospital, but there was also fear. Because when you're getting ready for an operation on the spine, they tell you about all the ways it might go wrong, or all the dangers there are, or how you might be left when it's over. And there might be tiny little, 1% dangers, but they do tell you. And when you're nervous, you focus on them. And of course, because of COVID, you're missing your loved one, your beloved. My beloved couldn't be there. She came up one time with a change of clothes to the hospital, and she left the bag at reception. And she phoned me. She says, I'm down here at reception. And I thought, she's so close, and yet she's so far away. I still wouldn't be able to see her before the operation, or maybe for a while afterwards. So COVID was another thing that kind of kept the sad narrative on the outside that I was living through from day to day, I'll admit, difficult to endure. And yet, on the inside, if I tried any kind of visualizations of a mentor deity or a bit of our meditation or something, it used to give me great peace. The sense that you were living not just in your gross body, not just the body that they were sticking needles in, but that there was a kind of a body that you were inhabiting that was more subtle, more kind of almost like floating like a mist, and that was inviolable, and that was engaged with all these mentor deities, Buddhas, saints, Christs, whatever. The kind of the iconography of the soul. The iconography of the soul is an amazing place to go. The most interesting cathedral to go to, or the most interesting prayer hall, or the most interesting temple is in the heart. And you can access that at any moment. And I want to tell you, I accessed that on a daily basis when I was in hospital, because if I was just living on the surface, I would have been terrified and worried and depressed. And I had a minor problem. I had a minor illness, really, compared with the kind of very serious and grave illnesses and procedures that people have to face in hospitals. So I'm not making a fuss about the little thing that was wrong with me that could be corrected, and yet even that can become a mountain of anxiety. And of course it's all to do with being self-obsessed. It's all to do with thinking, my life is the most important life. My life is the absolute life. My life is like, this is it. I am the one. I'm not fretting about the other people in the other beds. They're not me. It's me that's important. And of course, that's why I get burdened by sorrow and anxiety and fear. But for me, the great release was trying to go on the inside and in some way, in some half-baked way, finding I succeeded. Visualizing, mentor deities, meditation, mindfulness, call it what you want. And there emerges a kind of sense of a self that's not entirely enclosed in the physical body, but is living in a kind of an imaginative realm. And I love to be creative, imaginatively about this, because the musician, as I say at the end of my little story, the fairies were dancing somewhere inside him. It's the only way you could put it. You know, the fairies are the she, the invisible people who have the music, who live underground, and they were dancing inside him. Like they were like 1,000 angels inside him. And it was from that inside centre is where the music was coming from. And I can understand why people talk about music being from God. I can understand why people, you know, would say that Mozart was the voice of God. And even Mozart, it's so extraordinary that according to tradition, when people met him, he didn't on the surface, on the outside, seem like somebody who was full of serenity and wisdom. Like that he didn't realise his own gift. You might meet a shallow, loud-mouthed young fella, and you'd be thinking to yourself, that couldn't be Mozart, is it? And yes, it was. When he played, when he composed, the fairies were dancing inside him. The spirits, the angels, the choirs of angels. This is a very beautiful place to go. I have to share it with you. I never intended doing this in podcasts. I thought in the beginning, sure, it's a good idea to do podcasts. It's a good way of testing how to tell stories in a live situation, because I don't have the opportunity to go on stage anymore. And to some extent, that's still true. But what has really become true for me is in the past 12 months, something opened up. I couldn't resist sharing senses of faith that would be normally secret to me. And now, having gone through this final 6 months of worrying about the health and having an operation, minor operation as it was, it leaves me with such joy that I can't resist sharing it with you. That sense when I stay still and I just go inside and I begin to visualize the imaginative world, the dream realm of gods and deities, and feel their relationship with me as people who are minding me, who are loving me. Do you know, I often talk about there's a fella. Again, by the way, anybody I think that uses religion is crazy. I'm crazy. I think that religion is a kind of madness. But it's a very liberative madness. It's like if I'm talking to somebody on the outside in real terms, and I'm talking to somebody, then that person is real, I'm real, and we're on the surface. And in that engagement, the idea of metaphysics, the idea of gods, the idea of Buddhas is absurd. It's like it doesn't have a relevance. The only thing that has a relevance in that is to listen to the other person, to put the other person first, and to enjoy their company. So that every time you kind of go for the meditation space, the prayer space, it's like you're not just going into your own heart. As Jesus says, you know, go into the room in your own heart. You're not just doing that. You're kind of taking a step back from reality. And I think the danger is, and it's a particularly Western danger, that either you focus on what's inside as real to the detriment of what's outside, or you focus on what's outside being real and completely ignore your interior. And Tibetan Buddhism is very good on this. They would talk about the correct view being neither one thing nor the other. Neither the substantial reality of having a coffee with somebody else, nor the internal realm of mentor deities in your heart. Neither one is the place to lodge yourself. Neither one is the place to say, this is the truth. Somewhere in between is correct view. There's a phrase that says in one particular scripture, to treat phenomena as like illusions. As like illusions. It doesn't say treat them as illusions. Phenomena, things around you. The chair, the treadmill, the window. They're not illusions. but they're not entirely reality either. The reality of them is there, but there's another depth to the reality. And the place to live is in between the two. Acknowledging the substantial nature of the world around you, not as 100%, the totality of reality, and not treating them as illusions either, which would be the alternative, but as like illusions. That's the one that's worked for me. And I think it's the one that works in any religion. I think it's the one that works in any sort of therapy. The being here now is not gripping the reality around you. It's a kind of passive floating in the present moment. And that's the bit I get back to, the present moment. I used to use it in the hospital regularly. If only I could stay in the present moment, I was okay. When worries and anxieties came as to what will they do with my spine, how will they get in to fix what's wrong, could I be left with permanent damage, all that anxiety was coming from ideas in my head. And every time I was in the present moment, I felt okay. So that was a liberation. Don't grip the world too tightly. Don't hold to any truth, because the ultimate teaching is there is no teaching. Even if you figure out something that's true in relation to some particular religion, supposing you're following the path of Islam, the path of Judaism, path of Christianity, Hinduism, whatever, and you're following it and you find that it really helps you and really liberates your life, and you begin to think it's true. Or supposing that you have liberated yourself from religion and that you find you're no longer bound by all the neuroses and fears that you had as a child because you were thinking about all these terrible ideas about God and guilt and sin. And supposing you live a kind of a really beautiful, compassionate, humanist life. Again, don't grip it too tightly as the truth for everybody. Grip it as if it was true. Grip it like, I'm living this like an actor. I'm living this like as if it was true. And I think there is the space of absolute, complete freedom. It's all to do with just what we're doing in the present moment. The reason I love storytelling is because storytelling is like watching a narrative from the outside, which is also like watching a narrative from the inside. I say it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm heading for Smithfield in a van, in a lorry, Fox's fruit and veg lorry from Westmeath. Beautiful sunny day, and you can imagine it. I can imagine it. You can imagine it. We're in the story, and the story carries us along. And why do we love the story? Because our kind of tracking the story is almost simulating as if the story was ours. We're enjoying this experience of things that happen are on the surface, and inside is the watching, the gazing, the listening, the looking, the bearing witness to. I think bearing witness is a good phrase. I am here. You are here. I'm out of hospital. I feel very grateful. And I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.